Hello and welcome to AP Music Theory. This is our open house. My name is Mr. Paul Meiste, and I can be reached at pmeiste@lths.net. So, a common question is, what is AP Music Theory? It's basically like taking a first year of college music theory class. It's an in-depth study of music. That means we're going to know all about scales and chords and the various structures of music, such as phrases and form. And we use that to better listen to music. We're training ourselves to listen to music more analytically. A large part of the AP exam is listening to pieces of music and having to analyze it without seeing the music. Another big part of AP Music Theory is the ear training portion, which is being able to hear something and then usually write it out. That is a large portion of it. We call it dictation, as well as sight singing. We do a whole bunch of singing in this class as well. So I don't know if all the kids knew that before they signed up, but they certainly do now. How do the students get a grade? 100% of the students' grade comes from tests and projects. It's basically like a college course, meaning that we're going to have about 4 tests a semester, and that makes up their grade. There will be homework and other informal assessments, quiz-like things, but that will not count towards the final grade due to the new LT grading policy. So it's obviously important that students prepare for those tests so that way they can feel confident going into them as they do make up a large portion of their grade. My recommendations for being successful in AP Music Theory is, first of all, see me if the student is having problems. Too often, students wait until their grade is in trouble before they come and talk to me because and I was the same way when I was in high school. It's like, I'll get it next time, and then you don't get it so much next time, especially in a class like AP Music Theory, where all of the material continues on. We're never going to be like, well, we learned scales, and now we don't have to know scales anymore because scales make up everything. And if you can't read the music, you can't do anything. So everything snowballs a little bit in this course. So students should be seeking out help earlier rather than later. Speaking of scales, it's really important that students know and understand scales really, really well. One thing I recommend once we teach the major scales in this class is students should just go home and start writing out the scales each night in preparation for the next day, because the better they memorize those scales, the more that they get familiar with them, the easier everything else is. It's super easy to make like a D flat major chord if you know that the first note of the D flat scale is D flat, and then F is the third note, and then A flat is the fifth note. If you can just rattle those off, it's really, really easy. Practice sight singing and dictation outside of class. This is another thing that most theory students struggle with. We're used to being band, choir, orchestra students and practicing our instrument outside of class. This is essentially the practice your instrument part outside of class, right? The students need to practice the singing, especially the non-choir kids, because singing is such a big part of this class. It does count towards the grade. There's going to be a singing portion on every test. There's a singing portion on the AP exam where they record themselves and submit it. So singing needs to be practiced. Dictation outside of class, there's different websites you can use as dictation practice. But those are the two things that most students have no experience with coming into AP Music Theory. And if you're not spending time on it, well, imagine if you don't do your math homework, right? Your math grade's probably not going to be that well or that good. So the same is true of sight singing and dictation. I also recommend, if you want to drop money on another book, Barron's Guide to AP Music Theory is great. It just explains things a little bit differently than our textbook, and it really understands the AP Music Theory test. So that's another good guide. Plus, it has a whole bunch of dictation and singing examples that the students can use. So if your student ever says, well, I don't know where to get dictation materials, the Barron's Guide has a whole bunch in it, and it's a great resource. Lastly, I did want to talk about the AP exam. The College Board has said that all tests should look the same as they usually do this year. Um, a typical AP exam is a whole bunch of listening. The first hour or so of the AP test is students listening to various recordings and having to answer questions based on those recordings. So that is a large part of it. There is some multiple choice, but there's not that much where it's like, okay, I'm looking at a score on a page and I'm analyzing, and now I do my multiple choice question. That's not a very big part of the test, though. The biggest part is the opening listening section, and then the next biggest part is the ear training, the dictation, the part writing, and the sight singing. There's a whole bunch of free response questions in this where the students have to dictate two melodies, so they're going to be about like 4 bars long, and they'll hear something being played and then they have to write it down note for note. There's 2 questions that are harmonic dictation, where a chord progression is played and the students have to write down the notes of the chord. And then after that is the part writing. There's 3 part writing questions on this last chunk of the test, where they have to, maybe they're given a soprano part and they have to write an alto, tenor, and bass part, or they're given the bass part and they have to write the other parts. So that's the part writing section. And then there are 2 sight singing questions where they get a pretty challenging piece to sing. It's only 4 bars long. It's not like a full song or anything, but they only have about a minute to prepare it. So it's a pretty challenging task. That's why I think that this class is one of the hardest AP exams in the school, because you're not going to science class and having to do a lab experiment and at the same time do research, and at the same time you have to write down something that somebody says verbatim, whereas we have to do that, right? We have to listen to the music, you have to analyze it with only a few chances to hear it, you have to write part writing, you have to be able to perform through singing. So there's a whole lot of components on the regular AP exam. Having said that, if they did decide to do it remotely, that may look different. Right now, that's not their plan, but last year the test was only 4 questions. The first 2 questions were part writing examples, and the last 2 were sight singing examples. So some of your eyes might have just popped open when you saw that sight singing was such a big part of the test last year. Absolutely, it accounted for about 45% of their overall score last year. So that's why I'm stressing everybody, doesn't matter if they're a choir student or not, band, choir, orchestra, guitar, you name it, everybody needs to be practicing their sight singing, because if they're taking the AP exam, it is going to be a large part of their overall score. So hopefully that gives you some information. You can always reach out to me if you have questions. Email is a great way to do it, pmeiste@lths.net. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you later.